Welcome to Catholic Feedback. I'm your host, Keith Nestor. On this podcast, we connect the eternal truths of the Catholic faith with everyday life. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Down to Earth Ministry, a ministry of stewardship, a mission of faith, and by the generous support of our patrons. For more information, please visit downtoearthministry.org. That's down, the number 2, earthministry.org. Let's get to it. Welcome to Catholic Feedback. My name is Keith Nestor, and this is the podcast where we connect the eternal truths of the Catholic faith to everyday life. And boy, do we have an incredible episode today. We're not so much talking about a particular doctrine or aspect of the faith in terms of a teaching, but what we're talking about is something that many of us struggle with and go through. And it's one of the most common questions that I get asked. And it's this question: Keith, how do we get our kids to come back to church? And it seems like that is just the experience so many of us have, where maybe our kids were raised in the church, and then when they got to a certain age, maybe 18, 19 or whatever, they were just gone. And we want to know how to get them back. And that's a tough question. Well, today, joining me on the podcast, we're gonna ask one of them, okay? Because we're gonna be joined by a young woman named Amber Rose. She runs a social media ministry called the Religious Hippie, and she was raised in the church, left, and then came back, and she has graciously agreed to come on Catholic Feedback and have me ask her all kinds of like weird, awkward questions about her journey and her life. So let's bring in Amber. Amber, it's good to see you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh man, are you kidding me? This is awesome. I'm super pumped to have you here, and so is our audience. We've got a lively group here in the chat already gathering, and I'm sure that number is going to continue to grow as we move through this episode. But I'm excited because everybody wants to know, like, what are we supposed to do to get our kids back in the church? So I think, you and I have had this conversation before, but I would love for you to share some of these things. But before we get into all of that, tell us about who you are and kind of your faith background and your journey.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Amber Rose. You guys probably know me as the Religious Hippie. I'm 22 years old. I'm a junior at Liberty University online. I'm a graphic designer. I'm basically everything outdoorsy, camping, fishing, all that fun stuff. I was raised a cradle Catholic, obviously, and I was basically raised in the traditional Latin Mass. We went to both Novus Ordo and TLM, but mainly the TLM. And through my life, I was raised that way until about high school. And we'll get further into that. But basically, I fell away for 8 years, came back when I was 19, started my Religious Hippie stuff. And you can basically follow me on any social media platform. I have all of them. That's basically what I do. So
how many kids in your family?
Just me and my sister.
Okay, so you guys were brought up going to Latin Mass. What was that like as a little girl being brought into that? Did you have any kind of understanding what was happening, or was, when you were a little girl, was this just sort of you just endured it?
I hated it.
Hey, I want you to be 100% honest and real. We get that,
I absolutely hated it. I hated wearing pretty dresses. I hated wearing things on my head, like the veils. I hated getting up early. I hated all of that. I didn't understand what was going on in the Mass because we usually sat farther back. And so all I saw were people's butts. And I was just like, well, I don't know what's happening. Most of the time I would fall asleep in the pew. So in general, it wasn't like, when I was a kid, I gave my parents hell for taking me to church.
Really?
I was like, I don't want to be here. Like, I want to sleep. I want to play with my friends, my toys. I was not a girly girl. My sister, on the other hand, my sister was great. Like, she sat through it. She always wore the veil. But I definitely threw a hissy fit.
Is she older than you or younger than you?
She's older by 3.5 years.
Figures. Okay. Firstborn kids are the rule followers. They're going to like set the standard. And then it's you crazy youngest children that go crazy. Okay. But
I ruled the family. Everything I said went.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Okay, so you're growing up, you're going to Latin mass, you're not loving it. You know, what did you believe about God though? Did you have an understanding of who God is, or was it just all wrapped up in this experience that you weren't connecting with?
It was more like wrapped up in the experience I wasn't connecting with. For me specifically, around high school, after confirmation, they don't give you much catechesis, which was a huge issue for me because throughout high school, I always had, or throughout middle school and then partial of high school, I had some sort of catechism class for First Holy Communion or confirmation. There was always something going on there. And then when confirmation was over, there were no other classes I could take. And so my faith kind of fell by the wayside. And I didn't completely understand everything I learned in First Holy Communion and confirmation because I felt like I was too young to really comprehend everything. Even though having those sacraments are extremely important at that age, we still need to reiterate throughout our life the same things we learn so that we continue keeping it fresh in our heads and we understand it. For me specifically, I didn't understand a lot of it. I didn't understand confession. I knew that the Eucharist was Jesus. I didn't have an issue believing that. But I think as a younger teenager, confessing sins to a priest, which is Jesus, but it was just a little scary, I guess.
Yeah.
And because of that, it kind of made me very fearful of the faith. I didn't have any bad, experiences during confession. It was just I was a very introverted kid. I was very nervous about a lot of things, and that was one of them.
So talk about that fear for a minute. Were you afraid of just like getting in trouble, or were you afraid that you were going to go to hell when you died? What does that look like for you to be growing up in this traditional community, but not really connecting with it? I mean, what did you have like this plan of I'm doing this as long as I have to, and then I'm out of here? Or was it more of a gradual thing? And what was this fear like for you?
Yeah, it was hard, honestly. I think a lot of the fear came from my peers because I wasn't like them. They were all Protestant and I wasn't. And so I knew things about my faith that they didn't believe. And so it caused a lot of friction there. So there was some fear there of causing friction because I'm an introvert. I don't like causing, tension. And then from there, it really came down to I was afraid of getting in trouble, of course, for certain things. When you're about 10 or 11, you don't completely comprehend everything you do per se. You might be the age of reason, but there are certain things you're still trying to figure out if it's right or wrong. And then from there, I kind of just decided like, I don't really want to do this anymore, but my parents are the ones that fell away from the faith first. And then we just kind of went with that. So it was originally, we all would go to mass and things like that. And I don't know, I never really connected with any of the people there either. A lot of them were very cliquey, which can happen, unfortunately, in very traditional parishes. If you weren't basically raised with that family when you were a young kid, it's very hard to get into the community. And so we had a hard time finding community in a lot of those parishes too.
Did you guys move around at all, or were you kind of you grew up in the same place?
So we never moved. We still live in the same house as we did. But we were lucky. We have a lot of parishes to choose from around us. But I would say, especially for the fear of hell, like, oh my goodness, I had a huge fear of hell. Our house used to be haunted. And so I would have continuous nightmares about hell and things. And I didn't really understand that confession, like going to confession helped you from going to hell, of course. I didn't understand that completely at that age. I just knew I didn't want to go to hell. And so it was very confusing in my age because I didn't completely understand it.
So what happened with your parents then so they kind of just decided we're done with this too? And that's what led you away, or how did that go down?
Yeah. So basically, what ended up happening was there was some stuff going on in the church. Obviously, there still is. Um, but it really shook my parents.
Yeah.
And so because of that, they didn't want us around that kind of stuff. And so um, they kind of more or less identified as a set of occultists than
Mm.
anything else. And so because of that, like I was really young. I was 13, 14 at the time. I didn't completely understand the difference. All I knew was I was raised going to church and stuff like that. And even though I didn't like it, it was like one of the main foundations in my life. Like that was something we just always did.
Yeah.
It was very structural. And so as soon as we stopped going, it kind of like I was okay with it, like, at the time because I was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't have to sit in mass for, like, an hour and do nothing," like, yeah. But then as time went on and I got older, I realized, like, that was the only, like, structured thing that we
Mhm.
did, in that sense as a family, and I really, really missed that, despite the fact I gave my parents hell for it, but yeah.
So so for those of you that don't know, like a state of a contest is a person who identifies as being Catholic, but they believe that the chair of Peter is empty, that we don't have a pope right now.
Mhm.
So that's probably not going to be a person who becomes like a Baptist or something like that. So, but what do you do? Like, I've always wondered this. Like, if you become a state of a, not because I want to, but if you become a state of a contest, do you just like stop going to mass, but you still consider yourself Catholic? I mean, where do you go in that situation? Did they just not go anywhere?
We went to, this one parish that was in a basement of
Mm.
somebody's house. It wasn't the best, and they both agree, they're like, "That was not a good idea. That
Yeah,
was
but
not
that felt weird.
smart."
Yeah.
It was very creepy. And so, basically, yeah, they don't they're open to it, though, of course, like, they want um, to come back, like, actually, but
So are they still like that right now? Are they still state of a contest or?
kind of. It just depends on the topic, especially with Pope
Hmm.
Francis right now. It's a tough topic because I understand I understand it. Obviously, Francis is still the Pope. Like I know that 100%, but I understand the frustration. I
Yeah.
understand where it comes from. But yeah, certain topics they still side with it depending on sacraments, Pope. Like it goes back and forth all the time.
So you ended up coming back though. Talk to us about what led to that and how that kind of happened.
Yeah, that was crazy. So, basically, throughout high school, I fell away from the church when I was about 13 or 14. I was in a bunch of extracurricular activities. I was going to orchestra, I was in theater, I played cello for 10 years, singing, piano lessons. I was basically in everything. And so I was really busy. I didn't really
Mm.
miss church at all. I was just like, I didn't really have friends there, anyways. And we never had a community there. So there was no reason for me to miss church in my mind as a teenager. Um, Never went to any of the youth groups, nothing like that. And as time went on, um, I basically just forgot about it completely. I mean, I still would tell people, like, oh, yeah, I'm Catholic, if they asked, but I would always say just in name only, like we weren't practicing. And so people were just like, oh, okay, cool, like whatever, non practicing, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and so through time, I went with friends to Protestant services and things like that. I never participated. I just went because my friends went. And in my opinion, I probably shouldn't have gone anyways because I was just bored out of my mind. Like it was all kumbaya, like Jesus loves you, this and that, the normal stuff. And I'm like, yes, he does, but there's more to it than that. Um,
Mm.
and there was just like a bunch of just like rah, 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 and I'm like, yeah, this is completely boring. This is not my speed. But I went with them to Protestant services. I did not find them fulfilling at all. I was in and out of Venture Crews, which is like Boy Scouts but co ed. And I ended up getting into a really bad group. Unfortunately, I'm basically what you would call the punching bag of a group. They just like to beat me up all the time, and
Hmm.
they viewed it as like good fun. But as a 104-pound small person, I was always coming home with like bruises and stuff like that. And they drank and they were always having
Wow.
sex and drugs and stuff. And I, through the grace of God, I was, I was able to stay away from all of that. Um, I still somehow kept my morals about me despite despite falling away from the faith. But I saw what these drugs were doing to my friends, what alcoholism was doing to my friends. And I was just like, okay, this isn't good. Like, suicide was so high in my friend group. Like, the attempts or actually doing it, like, it was insane. My friends were in and out of hospitals. And through that, like, I was basically the therapist. I was somebody that everyone came to for, um, I guess, help and advice and things. And it was really draining though. And I was also still the punching bag. So even though I would help them, they would still like bully me in return after I helped them. And so a cycle of that started depression and anxiety. Um, and through that, I was still in some pretty bad homeschool groups too that were bullying me and spreading rumors about me. And I had no friends basically in high school. Um, and so I really struggled to fit in with friend groups. I had to constantly change the way I look to please others. I had to constantly talk a certain way, act a certain way. And it got really exhausting as a teenager. I felt like I couldn't actually be myself because I would never be accepted by anybody. And through that, it just kept spiking my depression. Like, you're the problem. You're the reason that, people are killing themselves. You're the reason because you can't help them. And obviously, that's the devil trying to get into my head. But I bought into it because I wasn't in union with the church. Um, so basically, when I hit 18 and 19, right around 18, I was at my lowest point. I was really depressed. I didn't have any friends. I just lost my best friend of 4 years because she thought I was just crazy. There was just a whole bunch of drama. And it was just like right about when I turned 19. I remember waking up and I didn't sleep at all that night. I was just like completely distraught, cried myself to sleep like every night. It was really bad. And I remember looking at the calendar that was hanging up on my wall. And it was, uh, what was it? It was around like June, and it was Sunday. And I was just like, interesting, Sunday. What's important about Sunday? And I was like, church? Like, okay,
Wow.
well, go to a Protestant service. Like, that's weird. And I don't know why it popped into my head that I wanted to go to church, but I was like, what else have I don't have anything else to lose. And then I was like, oh, I'm Catholic. Interesting. And so I basically got myself out of bed. I got myself dressed, pulled myself into the car, and went to church. I had a major conversion in front of the Eucharist. And I haven't really looked back since.
Was this a Latin mass church that you went to? Was it the old one, or was it your parents' Saint of Acantis thing, or like something
It,
different?
it was a Novus Ordo church that I went to that I don't go to anymore because it's extremely sketchy and tons of Eucharistic abuses. But that is basically where I had it. So
Wow. Huh. So okay, so you go and you have this amazing experience. Like, what does that feel like to you? I mean, you've been through some heavy stuff with your family and your friends and all of this, and now you're there. I can just imagine this. You're there before the Eucharist, and God's just working on your heart. And
yeah.
what's going through your mind at that point in time?
During that time, I was really struggling with sexual sin. I was really struggling with self harm. I was really struggling with a lot of things that I feel like teenagers go through these days. And the thing is that society tells them, oh, it's okay. It's okay to do that. This is
Yeah.
normal. You should feel fine about doing these things. And the funny thing is, though, we know it's wrong. Like, morally, we just know it's wrong. We
Hmm.
feel bad about it. Um, and so I basically just sat there, and in a way, God kind of just flashed before me like every single sin I ever committed in a way. And I was just like, whoa. like this isn't good. Like I don't want to witness this, but at the same time it was important for me to see it. And after that I was sitting in the back too because I didn't know anyone. I was like, this is weird. Um and it just felt like he was like, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, but you need to forgive yourself and you need to come back. And I was just like, but I can't. Like, I don't want to go to confession and I don't want to I was doing this whole crybaby thing because I was just like, I don't want to talk to a priest. I don't want to say anything. But yeah, he was basically saying, like, trust me, I forgive you. You need to come back.
Wow. Sounds like you had like a little illumination of conscience or something right there. I mean, where it just hit you and you were like, and I've been reading about that lately, just people who have that moment where God shows them their sin and it's like, now what are you going to do? And I think we all have that moment, Amber, where God allows us to see who we are and who he is. And then we have to decide what we're going to do with that.
Yes.
And it's not always an easy thing to do. And it's not, oftentimes it is scary, but did you have a moment where you were kind of like, okay, I want to put this out of my mind and just forget about this whole thing? Or were you like on fire for God at that point in time and there was no looking back?
Yeah, it kind of took me by surprise at first, but I kind of just went into it like full-fledged. I was just like, well, I guess I'm doing this then. It took me a long time to actually like go to confession though. I struggled with that quite a bit because I just felt like, what if I forget something? Like, what if I'm not prepared for this? What if I forget the prayers? Like, I was just very self-conscious. Again, anxiety. Like, I had anxiety about doing it wrong, which ended up leading to scrupulosity for a little bit there.
Yeah.
But I ended up going to my old TLM parish and doing confession there with this old priest, and he gave me a Fatima medal, and he was like, visit me. And I was just like, oh, okay. He's like 98 now. He's very old. So pray for him, please.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a changing point in my life because I was able to go from accepting God's forgiveness, but actually forgiving myself at that point when I went to confession. And so then after that, I joined a youth group at that parish. And there was a lot of sketchy things that happened there. We were taken to a Buddhist temple to meditate. There was just a bunch of stuff that just was not right. And as somebody who just newly came back into her faith, I was confused because I thought, I was just like, well, this isn't something Catholics are supposed to do, right? But yet our Catholic leader is taking us here. So it must be okay, right? And I really struggled with that. I didn't go in because I thought we were going to a Catholic monk to meditate, like on the rosary. Okay. But I didn't go in once I found out it was Buddhist. It was just really difficult having to realize that not everyone who claims to be Catholic actually practices and knows their faith.
Yep, that's a thing. That's a thing. And I think that's one of those things that is difficult for converts and reverts who are in this vulnerable place where you're basically saying, I want to do this, but I have to basically open myself up and be vulnerable and lay myself out before other people in the church and before the authority of the church. And then when you go through something like that, and then you're led astray by people in the leadership, it's very, I don't know, it can be very disheartening. I mean, what do you think kept you though from just sort of rolling with that and going, well, okay, whatever, I don't care. If that's what they want me to do, we'll do. And I grew up in this Latin mass thing. It was weird. Maybe this is the better way. So why not? What kept you from doing that?
Actually, going to the traditional Latin mass as a kid is what kept me from it.
Whoa, really?
Yeah,
How so?
I hated it as a kid, but when I got older, I really craved that tradition. I craved the quiet. I craved the simplicity of it and just being able to not participate. I mean, we participate quietly, but
oh yeah, we sure
especially
do.
in the low mass, you just sit there and really the entire time you just talk with God. Like, I really craved that over the shake hands with everybody, peace, 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 peace. And I'm like, what? And so because of that, when we did all of these things that just completely went against the faith, I was just like, no. And I remember specifically one night we were all in basically a room, and we were all talking about like what we wanted to do for the summer. This was before COVID hit. And one of the priests came in. He's dressed like a dad, basically. He doesn't wear his cassock, and unless he's doing mass. But he sat down.
Hold the phone a second here. What do you mean by that? Dressed like a dad? As a dad, like, I don't know. That just kind of hit me for a second. I'm just kidding.
He was wearing like a button down,
I know what you mean.
shirt with the shorts and the high socks with the gym shoes.
Okay, so let me just say this, okay? Sticking up for other dads out there. Not all dads dress like that, but that's okay.
I have yet to see one, except for maybe you, I guess.
Maybe.
We'll see. We'll
okay, see back to our topic here.
Yes,
that kind of hit me for a second, but
no, it's okay. But yeah, and so he doesn't really wear his cassock, you know. So I didn't know he was a priest at first. I just thought he was one of their dads. And he walks in with a notepad and he sits down in front of us and he goes, "All right, kids, what do you guys want to change about the Catholic Church?" I feel like that was getting ready for a spit take right there.
No.
But yeah, he basically told us, he's like, "What do you guys want to change about the Catholic Church?" And I was just like,
like, was he being serious? Like I'm making a list and taking it to the bishop, or was he probing because he wanted to explain to you why you can't do that?
No, he was going to write things down, and he did. And so we went around the room, and the girls were saying, "We want birth control to be okay, and we want female priests, and this and that." Like there was this whole thing, and I literally, that when she said, "I want female priests," and they're like, "Oh, we want condoms handed out after mass," and I'm like, then go to a Baptist church.
Oh, Baptists wouldn't do that. You got to go to like a well, I shouldn't say any denomination, but you got to go to like a mainline liberal Protestant denomination.
I'm not sure which one that would be.
Well, you just count yourself lucky, but it wouldn't be the Baptist.
No. Interesting. Okay. I get them mixed up.
We'll just say this. If you go to an Anglican church, you can probably do that.
Okay. There you go.
Now some Anglicans are going to get mad at me and send me hate mail, but they probably know too, though. They're probably like, yeah, that can be a thing.
That's a thing.
Anyway.
But yeah.
I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that this priest would do that.
Yeah. And he literally took down notes, and I was trying to intervene and be like, well, we can have like nuns come in and talk to us. Like we can, like they're sisters, like we can volunteer with them. We can do something like that. But no, they were like adamant. They wanted female priests. And I'm just like, ugh. And so I literally Googled that night. I was just like, traditional parishes near me.
Wow.
And yeah. And I found my TLM parish, and then I went there, and that's when I had my confession and stuff like that. So.
Okay. So there's a lot of things that are just, I'm sort of going, ooh, I want to say something about that. I want to come back to this. Basically, couple things, Amber. I'm noticing, and I'm thinking of this through the lens of, dad, and a lens of, middle-aged guy in the church who has, tried to find his way into either Novus Ordo, TLM, whatever. And honestly, like I go to the Latin Mass, that's my thing, but I'm not like, the Novus Ordo is evil, or anything like that. People know that about me. But I do think it's interesting that from your perspective, so many of the things that people have done to try to make the faith seem cool and relevant and hip and awesome to someone like you, a young girl like you, it completely backfired.
Yep.
And what you were drawn into, and I think this is huge, what you were drawn into was not some kind of worldly gimmick that just happened to go along with the church. You were drawn into the traditional aspects of the faith that can only be found in Catholicism. Okay.
Yeah.
That's, to me, like I want the priest to write that down.
Mm-hmm.
I want to write that down. Stop trying to take our faith and water it down and make it like the world and make it cool and hip and cool, because you can't do it anyway. You're just going to wind up looking like a dorky dad. Be cool. Wear your cassock. Act like a priest. Show people the transcendent aspects of the eternal faith that can only be found in its fullness in Catholicism. Stop apologizing for it and trying to make it look, hip and cool so girls like Amber will come back, because she didn't. What she cared about was that transcendent truth and power of God that was found in the Catholic faith. And that, I'm telling you, I mean, I'm getting a little fired up, Amber. Because
it's okay. I was pretty mad too.
well, no, I'm excited because like you are the poster child for like what I've been talking about for a long time.
Gerber baby.
Yeah, because I've been saying this because I used to be a youth pastor, okay? And one of the things that I tried to do all the time was to try to figure out how to make church cool. And it worked for me for about 5 years. And then what I learned was the stuff that I thought was cool wasn't cool to kids anymore. So they quit coming. And I remember thinking, well, who really cares? This is about Jesus anyway. But it wasn't for a lot of them. It was about how cool can we make this? And I feel like there's this push in some of our Catholic faith that we want to try to do the same thing. And I've been just screaming from the top of my lungs, you can't do that. You shouldn't even try. And younger people like you are resonating with the traditional aspects of the Catholic faith because that's what makes it special, right?
Yeah.
What makes it special. And I feel like people need to pay attention. And I want to encourage you, that's something to continue to talk about. The danger, though, that can happen is people can turn that realization into religious self righteousness. Yeah. So now it becomes, well, I'm the real Catholic because I go to the Latin Mass, and if you don't go to the Latin Mass, you're not a real Catholic, and I'm cool because I do this and do that and all this other stuff. You can become a Pharisee, right? You got to be careful about that. Anyway, I'm getting off track here, but like, I want people to listen to what you're saying.
No, absolutely. And that was the thing. It's like that was like one of the big things when I said like, oh, I like the traditional Latin Mass, because at that point that Novus Ordo was the only experience I had with the Novus Ordo. Yeah. I go to a very traditional Novus Ordo now, which is very nice. And I go to Novus Ordo anyways if I can't make it to the TLM. Like, duh, I'm not going to skip Mass just because I can't go to the TLM. Like, that's stupid. But that was the only experience I had with the Novus Ordo. So I definitely had some of that. I had an issue with that because I was like, if this is what Novus Ordos are like, I don't want to be a part of that. I was never like 100% like TLM goer. Like, I would still go to the Novus Ordo, but then when I got a TLM by me over here, I was just like, ooh, yay, TLM 24/7. But the thing is it's like those people who are like, oh, I'm better than you because I go to the TLM, or I'm better than you because I prefer Novus Ordo. I'm like, that just causes more division. Do I prefer the TLM? Absolutely. But do I still go to Novus Ordo? Absolutely. It's just one of those things that I feel like is so petty, as Catholics to discuss. I'm like, we have bigger issues.
We certainly do.
Yeah, we have so many bigger issues, and you guys are all caught up on, oh, I go to TLM, so I'm better than you, or I do this, so I'm better than you. And I have had people who come at me and say like, you think you're better because you go to the TLM, and I'm like, no, I go to the Novus Ordo too. You don't even know me. Hush, And that's the whole thing of being on social media, though. Like, you're going to get judged for going to TLM or going to Novus Ordo. It's never ending.
It's very interesting to me, your story, because you talk about all this bullying you endured, all this depression that was a result of everything everybody was doing to you and talking crap about you and all this kind of stuff. And now you're on social media all the time. I mean, that's like, you just went from the frying pan into the furnace. That's a dad saying, by the way. I think I got it right. Anyway, my point is this: you went from one extreme to an even greater extreme. And how has that been for you as far as like, do you find yourself getting pulled into those depressing thoughts, or are you able to just roll with it?
It was different when I was in high school because I actually knew those people. And a lot of the times it was cyberbullying. And so that's a lot harder too, because I didn't know exactly who was saying it. So the people who were bullying me were my friends, but I didn't know which ones. So it created a lot of anxiety and trust issues because I wasn't sure who was saying those things and making those posts about me and spreading those rumors. Eventually I did figure it out, but had to kind of weave out, separate the chaff from the wheat, so to speak. But when I started up social media again, it definitely bothered me quite a bit in the first year. Like just people telling me things about my faith that weren't true, the whole like you worship Mary, the
Oh gosh,
saints, like
yeah.
been there, done that. And
They
I
always
used to
act like
get,
they're the first one that says that to you too, don't they? They're like, just so you know.
yeah, exactly. They're just like, I don't know if you knew this, but you worship
You're like,
Mary.
never heard that before.
Yeah, exactly. And I was still new, I was still pretty new on to my faith. And so I felt like a lot of my anxiety with social media came from me not completely being confident in my faith yet. I was still
Yeah.
pretty new. I didn't completely know everything or how to respond to certain arguments. And a lot of the times I didn't know how to pick my battles wisely. I basically would just, if anybody DM'd me, if they were picking a fight, I would just communicate with them anyways, instead of just being like, weeding it out and being like, okay, this person obviously wants to start a fight. This person's actually curious about what Catholicism is.
Yeah.
And that's something we need to do. We need to pick our battles wisely because we can't be throwing our pearls to swine. We can't be wasting our energy on people who are obviously just looking to pick a fight. And if they're curious, well, guess what? They can continue following you and looking at your page and stuff. But people can be respectful and be curious about the faith. So I never really respond to disrespectful people because I have those boundaries and I have those set in place. But it's one of those things where I think because it was strangers after the first year or so, like I still get threats all the time. Like they range from just you stupid expletive to anything else you can think of. And I just kind of like look at my phone if it pops up. I'm like, nice. And then I'm just like, delete. And it doesn't bother me anymore because I know my faith now and I'm confident in it. And even if they think I'm some washed up person, I don't care. Like, what is that to me? They don't know me, right? They're not
Yeah.
my friend. They've probably just came across my page and maybe they're struggling with something. And whenever I do see somebody who's struggling with something or maybe they're bugging me in some way, I lift them up to God and I'm like, God, I don't know what they need, but you do.
Man, you're better than I am. I just like pray that God kills them. Like,
A flower pot just like drops on their head.
yeah, no, it's that's a very mature way to handle that, And I think we all need to learn from that because it's tough to get, people coming after you and stuff, but you do learn eventually. You do learn that people, trolls on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, you don't have to engage with that. And it doesn't mean that you're admitting they're right. If you decide I'm not getting into it with this person because it's just a waste of time. But I want to ask you a couple other questions about when you were in that process of coming back. We've talked about a couple things that were unhelpful from the standpoint of dad priest with the list and all this kind of stuff. What were some things that were helpful to you? Because and here's of course where we're going is the people that are wanting their kids to kind of go through this experience you went through and return. We all want to know what we should do to help people that are in that situation. What are some things that actually helped?
Something that really helped was actually my sister.
Really?
Yeah. So my sister, she prayed for me to come back to the faith for years. And so being like a Saint Monica, so to speak, you kind of have to be that for your kids and for your siblings and for your family. You got to make sacrifices and pray for them to come back. It's not going to happen overnight. I mean, Saint Monica, she probably had to wait, what, like 30, 40 years or something?
17 years.
17?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Not as long as I thought it was, but still, 17 years is a very long time. Okay. And St. Ambrose actually turned her away multiple times and thought she was crazy. So, I mean, it's just crazy how prayer and fasting works, sacrificing. The other thing I would say that really helped me was community. I didn't have community while I was away from the church or while I was in the church as a kid or while I came back. I really didn't have a sense of community. People who were actually into their faith, knew their faith, went to confession and mass regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started going to my traditional Latin mass parish, St. John Cantius downtown, I found that community. These women basically adopted me as their younger daughter. And I had these mom friends.
They're dressed like
um,
moms.
yeah, yeah. And the funny thing is that I would come in like the weirdest outfits because I still didn't really know how to dress.
Well,
And they
you're
would be
supposed to
like,
be a hippie, so you're supposed to have some kind of hippie clothes, right?
yeah, I wore my shower shoes to church by accident. I forgot to take them off. And I walk in with like these socks and like these flip flops. And they just like look at me and they're like, that's that's new. Is that a new style the hip kids are using these days? And I was like, no, Sharon, it's not. I forgot my real shoes.
So these women, and this is super important, you guys. This is an aspect of the faith that I think is something that we overlook. People that are, my age and older, whatever, we look at these younger kids, you guys, and we think, oh, well, they wouldn't want to talk to us. We can't relate to them. They're going to think we're dorks. They're going to, young people only need to hang out with other young people. And what I'm feeling here is that, no, that's not necessarily true. Like what the scripture says, that older men should mentor younger men and older women should mentor younger women. Right. Mm-hmm. So, you may be a mom whose kids left the church, but there's probably somebody like Amber walking into the church who's ready to come back. She needs you, right? While you're praying for your daughter, you can be the answer to somebody, to that other girl's mom's prayer, and go and minister to this girl. So talk to us about what these women did to help you as you were coming in. And were they worried that you weren't going to want to talk to them because they weren't your age?
It was funny because I was taking a Latin class with them. And at that point, I still didn't have any community. So I didn't really know anyone there or anything. And I remember walking into my Latin class. It was a beautiful day out. And one of them was sitting basically by the door. And they were just like, oh, are you here for the Latin class? This was our first day. And I was just like, yeah, and she's probably about in her 40s. And she was just like, come sit and talk with me. And I was just like, oh, okay. All right, cool. Like, okay. And then her friends came over and they were just like, oh, who's this? Like, oh, and we all kind of just like sat together and stuff for Latin class, and they would help me. And then one of them gave me like a notebook. Like, they're still very maternal, and their kids, unfortunately, weren't really in the faith anymore. Like, which is, and so they just like catered to me and anything I needed. They're like, why don't you come get coffee with us after mass? And why don't you join our women's group and we'll pray the rosary together and we'll do this women's retreat together. And we went to like everything. We went to like this mass at 4:30 in the morning for the Assumption. What? Or was it the Assumption or the, I don't know. It was something though, but we were there at like 4:30 in the morning. And I remember I was sitting there with our candles and I was falling asleep. And so she took my candle. She's like, honey, don't fall asleep, sweetheart. And I was just like, okay, I might not try to, but like, just, it really helped to have like 4 moms. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt very beautiful. Protecting,
That's so important. I really want everybody to make sure you guys are keying into that. That's just so huge. That's the way it's supposed to be, my friends. And here's the thing, there's going to be moments in your life when you feel like you don't have anything to offer. Look for somebody who is new, who is lost, who doesn't know what to do. And you don't have to become overbearing. I mean, I don't think these women probably like sent you 30 different videos and articles every day and said, you have to watch this, you have to read. And were they giving you books and stuff? Like every time you turn around, like, here, figure this out. Sometimes it just takes like being maternal, or being paternal and really helping reach out to someone, because it's those relationships that they're just priceless, you guys. Stella and I were talking about this today. We've got a family in our church that's super good at this. And the ripples of how they treat everybody around them, like it has brought so many people into the kingdom of heaven. I believe that with all my heart. And you're saying so many things that are just reinforcing this idea in my head. So was there anything else that was helpful to you? I mean, you got people praying for you. You got your sister praying for you. You've got these women that are that are doing this, what about like helping you to learn things? Was there anything that helped you with that, or did you already kind of have all that built in from when you were a little girl going to Latin mass?
I basically had to relearn everything, actually. I didn't know that the catechism existed.
Okay.
So
Kind
I bought a catechism and I started reading from that. I
Boom.
learned a lot from Father Mike Schmitz and Catholic Answers. I would just basically dove into a bunch of books. St. Alphonsus Liguori was great, especially with his How to Converse with God and Uniformity with God's Will. Those two books, they're about 30 pages each. Amazing books. They go hand in hand, and I suggest them to everybody. Those were extremely helpful to me. Um, and I basically just had to learn what I could. I mean, there were some people where they were willing to talk with me about certain things, and if I had questions, especially talking to the priests was very beneficial. Um, if I had questions or something, I would just be like, "Hey, do you have a second? Like, can I ask you this?" Or I would even ask if they could get coffee for an hour or so. Just anything like that. I was very shy. I was very anxious about learning things because I didn't want to. Um, I guess I knew that priests were very busy. I didn't want to be a burden, so to speak. But it's interesting because all the priests, they were like, whoa, a young person wants to know about the faith. Like she's asking questions and she wants to know this. And they would get really excited. They'd be like, oh yeah. Like, I'm free this time. Are you free? Are you still going to be here then? Or they'll be like, yeah. I'll be there in like 5 minutes. Like, let me just take my vestments off from mass. And so I think we kind of underestimate like
Mm.
priests to an extent. Like priests are very, very uh, what's communal. Like they want to teach the youngins, but they don't want to feel like they're forcing it on the youngins. Like the young ones have to come to them and be like, "Hey, can you tell me about this or that or this?" And I feel like a lot of times we're afraid of priests.
Oh,
um,
it's true.
and I don't know exactly why that is, honestly. Like I know I was afraid of priests too. But once you actually get to know them personally and you have these conversations with them and you start talking with them, it's completely different. But there are some priests out there that are not like that. I ran into maybe two or three of them. But again, there are way more good priests than there are priests that are, like that.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, I think I can relate to what you're saying about having questions but not wanting to bother the priest. But the priests that I've talked to and that are in my life, these guys are like, that's what we're here for, Keith. You're not a burden. It's not, this is what we wake up every morning to do. And I would tell you this, if you have a priest that when he wakes up in the morning, he's not interested in teaching someone the faith, then he probably needs to do something else, or go on a retreat or something and get that worked on. But that's huge. Hey, I want to take some questions here from the chat. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if you guys have questions, I know I've seen some of them kind of rolling in here, but let's kind of open that up a little bit here. And one I did see that I think is kind of important is talk to us about the role that the Blessed Mother has played in bringing you back into the church. Are you a rosary chick? Are you into that kind of thing? Or like where are you with the Mary stuff?
Yeah, I think it was really tough for me with Our Lady for a little bit there, mainly because like I didn't have the best relationship with, you know, family, and then on top of that with friends. Like all the girls that bullied me in high school were female. Well, duh, all the girls that
All
bullied
the
me in high
girls
school
were
were female.
female.
I would hope so.
Can't say that anymore all the time.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say. I was like, wait, can I say
Can we
that?
do that? Can we agree?
Exactly. And so I had like I always connected better with the men. And so for me, it was more or less going directly to Jesus, although I did start praying the rosary before I made my conversion, but that was because I was reflecting on Jesus's life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I started praying the rosary before I actually converted or reverted, whatever, something like that. um, but yeah, I mean, I'm an avid rosary prayer and I have a really great relationship with Our Lady of Sorrows. Um,
Awesome.
that's my biggest one because she really helped me realize that I go through these sufferings for a reason. And even though I might not understand what that reason is right now, I can always align it with Christ's and it'll pay off maybe in the future for souls in purgatory or for something else.
Awesome. All right. This question's come up a couple times. It's kind of a deep theological issue that you might need to do a little research on to answer this, but I think you can handle it. It's, why is Starbucks or Caribou coffee better than Dunkin' Donuts? I mean, that's like, there's some kind of
oh my goodness
archival Vatican document about this, I'm sure somewhere, but
I think Jesus talked about this at one point. Yeah.
I don't know what this is about. Is this, you know?
So the thing is that people who know me know that I go to Dunkin' all the time because I had this thing against Starbucks for giving money to Planned Parenthood, except for the
Right.
fact that literally every single company does that. Because what they do is they just take the donations that their workers want to donate towards a cause and they just match that donation. And so I'm like, I guess I can't really actually hold Starbucks against that. Like it's not completely bad because Dunkin' Donuts does something similar too. So honestly, Starbucks does have better coffee. I will admit it. Starbucks does have better coffee, but it's more expensive and you don't need Starbucks 3 times a day.
I will agree with that statement right there. I will agree. Okay, a couple other questions here. All right, I'm looking through here, you guys. Eli says Keith Nestor. It's Keith Nestor with an E, but that's okay. I get called Keith Nestor my whole life. It's an honest mistake. Eli, how do we get our parents back in the church? Great question. Well, that'll have to be a different episode when I can find some parents that came back. But
I'm still trying.
We'll work on that. Pray for your parents, that's for sure. Okay, how do I get my husband back in church? Yeah, Don, that's a good question too. I think some of these are going to have similar answers. I think threads that are weaved through is like, first of all, remember, God has to do this. This is a God thing. Amber, your deal was not, you weren't argued. Someone didn't just like walk up to you one day and ask you a question or say something to you and you were like, okay, I see the light. Like you came to that place with God in front of the Eucharist and then boom, you were there. I mean, that's a God thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say just in any of those situations, while we could do a whole other podcast about both of those, the main thing you want to do is you want to pray and fast for their conversion.
Amen. Okay, I'm looking for a question from Little House of Poverty. My wife said she has a question. Okay, here it is. I got it. Okay. What would you suggest to parents whose children are so caught up in the things of the world, LGBTQ, pro-choice, struggle with mental health issues, to guide them back? This is like every kid, it feels like right now, that is going through these issues. So like you got these kids that are caught up in this stuff, and their parents are worried about it. Like, do you have advice for parents, like what they do with these kids?
My advice is like kind of blunt. So I don't want to be rude or offensive to anybody. The main reason that kids usually have those issues is because of the friend groups they hang out with or because of public school, because they're being indoctrinated through all of this public school stuff. I was fortunate. I was homeschooled. The only exposure I had to any of that stuff was during theater because most of the guys in theater were gay. But I didn't understand what that meant. And for the most part, it was before I actually got to when I was a teenager, that stuff wasn't really prominent until 2016. And by then I already knew what I believed and stuff about gay marriage and things like that, which obviously is, I don't believe in it. The best thing that I can say for you is they need good examples in their life. If they're watching TV shows, I don't know how old the kids are at all, so I can't really specify. This is just in general. You need to take control of your kid's life. You're the parent. You're their guardian. You're the person that needs to set restrictions on their iPads, their iPhones, their TV shows, and their TVs, what they're watching, what they're reading even. You're the ones that need to see what friends they're hanging out with, see if they're a good influence or not, those kinds of things. And if it comes down to it, maybe they need to switch schools. If homeschooling's an option, homeschool them. But it all comes down to you're the parent. You have that control of really helping them and guiding them back by setting good examples and putting good people into their lives. And again, I don't know how old these kids are. It's so difficult.
They're adults.
Teenagers.
Like
adults.
What do you do if they're like your age? Let's say they're like 22.
Oh,
I mean, you're 22 years old. Like, pretend for a second that you're not back in church. You're in that mindset that you were in. And like, we want to help you come back into the faith. What do we do?
yeah.
You know, and I know that's a heavy question, but like, I mean,
Well, no, I totally get it, and I'm in my mindset right now of what I would have been in when I was about
yeah.
17 or 18.
I mean, I think the
And
example thing is still going to be there, obviously, set
yeah,
the example, but
set the example and pray and fast. But the thing is I know when I was in that mindset, I didn't want to hear it from nobody. I
hmm,
didn't want anyone to tell me what to do, what to think, or how to act. I was so out there because I was like, nobody understands me. They don't know what I'm keeping in. Like, they don't know my secrets. They don't know anything that I'm struggling with. And so I'm
yeah.
not going to let, how can they tell me how to live? They don't even know me. Like, I had a lot of anger.
Hmm.
Um, and really, I think I mean, like, people would talk to me about God all the time. Like, I had Protestant friends that were like, "Well, Jesus loves you and this and that." And I'm like, "Shut up. Like, I don't wanna hear that. Like, how dare you say that?" Like, I was so like, I was just like, "That's not helping me. Like, you don't understand. Like, I don't believe in this." Um, there was just, like, this whole thing, and they'll still tell you till this day, I was very adamant about not wanting to hear about Jesus.
Hmm. Wow.
And, yeah, I was very adamant about that.
They
So
must think you went crazy now.
yeah.
I love it.
Especially now that I became Catholic and they're Protestant, they're just like, "Dude, you
I love it.
overshot. Like, where are you going?"
You overshot. You overshot. You were just supposed to be here and you went here. So here's what this is doing for me right now, Amber, because, I've got 3 kids that are young adults that love the Lord, to a certain degree, not as much as I wish they would, but no, they're great kids. But like, I want them to become Catholic. And that's no secret. They know that. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't bug them about it. I don't like, spam them with articles and stuff. I mean, I just love my kids and want what's best for them. But here's the thing. I have recognized that it's not going to happen because I say something, but perhaps if I pray hard enough, God will do in them what he's done in you. And that, like, your story gives me hope because I feel like there's so many of us out there who are trying to figure this out. And we get frustrated because we think that there's just a lack of information. But really what it is just God has to grab their heart and we can sacrifice and pray for them. But we want to know what to do, what not to do. Like Stella says, she has this question. This is my wife, by the way. She says, should we still talk to our adult kids or should we back off as parents? Like, if they're in that place, what do you think, Amber? Should we just be like,
I
all right.
Yeah, the biggest thing for that is definitely still talk to your kids, especially if they're interested, but I think the important thing is to meet them where they're at. So
Hmm.
let's say your kids are Protestant. Meet them where they're at and don't like push all of this Catholicism on them. Just understand what they understand about the Bible and tradition. See what they believe so then you can match that in a way that maybe they'll understand a lot better. Because I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. So when people were like, Jesus loves you and this and that, I was like, how do I know that? Like, I was very confused about just everything. And so um, it was really more or less important that I needed people to understand where I was at in that point in life with where I was with the sin and the self-harm and all of that.
Yeah.
And so I needed people to understand that before I could go to Christ. Um, and so it's the same. We need to meet them where they're at. And we do the same thing for pro-life work. If there's a woman who's about to go into an abortion clinic, we meet her where she's at and what she believes about abortion. And then we try and work our way back to what a fetus is and that it's a baby. And we would love to get her over to a crisis pregnancy center to see an ultrasound. So we meet people where they're at and we try to figure out what they believe so that we can better communicate what we believe. And it takes practice. It really does take practice to not be pushy about it and
Hard.
not to be, yeah. I mean, I'm still like that too, where I'll have a Protestant friend that says something and I'll just be like, but then I'll be like, wait, that I can work with that. Yeah.
No, I can relate to that. I think that's great advice. I think meeting people where they're at. I mean, that's what Jesus did, obviously. He did that whether whether he was meeting with a Gentile, a Roman centurion, a Samaritan woman, or a tax collector, a prostitute, whatever. He met people where they were so that he could show them his love.
Yeah.
And it was the love of God that opened up those doors. And I think it's the same thing with us. You know, when people know that we truly love them and that we just want what's best for them and we care about them, not just so that we can be right and be like, well, I got to show you that I'm right and you're wrong. Like, I don't think anybody's been argued into heaven. You know what I mean? But they sure have been loved into heaven. And I know that might sound kind of hokey, but
it's true.
I think it is true. I think it is true. And listen, it's important for us to listen too. It just can't be a relationship where, like, you can't know where somebody's at if you don't listen to what they say, right? They don't know where they are.
Yeah.
So, okay, a couple other questions that I have for you, and I'm seeing some other ones that'll be kind of coming in here. But tell us what your social media ministry is like, what your plans are for the future, and then I have one final question that I think is really important. But like, tell us about the religious hippie and what that means, because people are like, what is that?
Yeah. So that kind of started by an accident. When I came back to my faith, I went to basically like this midnight mass we had. And I was just like, I'm going to make a TikTok about my faith because I'm one of those girls now. Well, it blew up overnight. I did not expect it to do that. I was one of the first Catholic TikTokers that blew up, basically. I obviously had other Catholic TikTokers, but mine was the only one that actually took off. And then from there, people found me and they were like, oh my gosh, like your account actually took off. Like, can we all join a group? And I was like, heck yeah, let's go. And so when God placed that evangelization opportunity in my lap, I was just like, what am I going to do with this? And then I realized, I'm like, there's probably tons of people out there who are just as lost as I was. And I have the opportunity to help those people. I have the opportunity for those people to reach out to me and ask questions when I couldn't do that with anyone. I couldn't just reach out to Lila Rose or Scott Hahn or anything like that and be like, hey, can you tell me about the Catholic faith? I wasn't a big influencer and they wouldn't respond to me. And so, well, they might have, I don't know. But in my head, I was just like, I'm not big enough for a big person who's like really into their faith to talk to me. So I'm going to make my own account. And from there, like, I get emails constantly, DMs all the time of people saying, you've really helped me with my faith and coming back or understanding it. And that is all that this is about, you know, and it's all because God put it in my lap. I didn't do anything. He's the one that evangelizes and gets my stuff out there. I just have to post it. And so far we're on Instagram. I have my own podcast called The Catholic's Perspective. I have Twitter, I have Facebook group, everything. And so we're also, my producer and I were currently working on setting up a page, like a web page, so I can sell merchandise and you guys can interact with me even more, stuff like that. So it's going to be really, really good. It's really exciting, and I'm excited. Awesome.
Man, I'm super proud of you for that.
Thank you.
I think that's great. You know, can I ask you a question? And you can be blunt.
I'm ready.
Like, are dads allowed to like be in that stuff, or do you have to be like young and cool?
You're allowed to be in that kind of stuff. Yes.
Okay. Sometimes you have to answer those questions when you join Facebook groups. You know, do you really own this brand of motorcycle? You want to join our group? Do you really do this? Are you really Catholic? You know, are you a dad? Do you wear socks and sandals, or, you know,
that one time at church,
you know, do you wear a denim shirt and khaki pants everywhere?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to know that. I would love to get my kids involved with that. I think they would love you. I think it'd be super awesome. You know, I'm meeting like all these young Catholic YouTubers and stuff, you know, doing this. And I always tell my wife and even some of my kids, I'm like, oh, I just met this person. You've got to meet them. And they're like, Dad, we live here in Iowa. They live in wherever else.
Right.
But
it's crazy how that happens.
That's so cool. Okay. So if you guys have any other questions, that would be awesome. Just go ahead and drop them, because I have one more question, but I need to say hello to Santiago. Hey buddy, how you doing, man? He watches the Rosary Crew and watches Catholic Feedback. Good to see you. Be good to your mom, Trinity. She's awesome. Okay. So here's the question I have for you. And this is kind of the last question I have for you, unless other ones come in. What advice do you have for kids that are thinking of leaving the church, that are where you were when you were like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I think I'm just going to say, forget all this. Like, what would you say to them? Because you probably do talk to some kids like that.
There's a lot of pressure on the younger generation. A lot of pressure from the world, peers, other people. Like the kids are stressed. Kids are very stressed. And we need the church. We need the sacraments to just keep us sane. But I know for a fact that from people I have talked to, young adults, kids, whatever, who have thought about leaving the faith, it's either because of the news, it's because of what Pope Francis is saying, or because of some propaganda going around about the church, some, heresy, or it's because their friends aren't Catholic and are trying to persuade them to leave the faith because their friends are Protestant or a different denomination or something else. Those are usually the top two things that I see the most. The whole, wanting to leave the church because of the Pope and like sexual abuses and clergy and stuff like that. That's usually for more people my age and like ages like 22 to 25-ish, I find. Like from ages like probably 13 to 18, I would say it's because of peers. Mm-hmm. But usually what I try to tell them is I'm just like, you guys need to be bold in your faith and accept it. Like this is unique and you've been given a gift. And, to throw that gift away is to throw God's mercy and forgiveness away. And I always tell them, I'm like, look, the best thing you can do is to research the heck out of Catholicism and find the truth. Amen. And if you are determined to find the truth, you will see that it leads to Catholicism. And if you do that, then you will know Catholicism is true, and you cannot like morally leave Catholicism because it's truth. You know that it's wrong or wrong to leave. And I had one person tell me like, well, I know it's true, but I'm going to leave, have fun, and come back. And I'm like, you have no guarantee that you will come back. Not because, I'm just going to party forever, but because we are never promised tomorrow. You could die the next day and you won't be able to come back. You will make, the mistake of never being able to reconcile with God. And that's why it's so important that we are in communion with the church. We are in the state of grace, and we do receive the sacraments and receive God's mercy on a weekly basis.
Awesome answer. Awesome answer. Hey, one more question for you. Who's your favorite saint?
Saint Drago currently.
Saint Drago. I don't know who Saint Drago is. Who's Saint Drago? Is that like the guy from Rocky IV?
I love him so much. He's actually become very popular amongst the younger generation.
You don't get my joke.
I don't. Dad jokes.
all the Gen Xers are like, yeah. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, I'm probably more like a millennial. But basically, he's the patron saint of ugly people and coffee.
What? There is not a patron saint of ugly people. Are you kidding me?
Look it up. It's hilarious.
Oh my goodness. That has to be like a technicality or something. I mean, I can see coffee, but the patron saint of ugly people. I mean, that's just terrible.
I love it. And I don't know why, but the kids that I teach a CCD class right now for 6th graders. And for some reason, they just get a kick out of that. And so we have this like ongoing joke about Saint Drago.
So funny. I'm going to look him up. him up.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Amber, this has been so much fun talking with you. I want to thank you for taking time to share your story with us and for letting us have a picture into your life and your journey. It's been incredibly eye-opening to me and very inspirational. And I'm really encouraged by what God's doing in your life and how you are just letting God work through you in some amazing ways. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for taking time to be here. Do you want to let everybody know, if they haven't picked up already, where they can find you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And you guys, again, can find me on any social media platform. Just type in the Religious Hippie, and it's HIPPIE at the end. So you guys can find me. I have YouTube, podcast, Instagram, Twitter, everything. TikTok even. I don't do TikTok. We're almost at 100K on TikTok. So.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Well, you keep bringing the faith to those places and letting your light shine. And I know that God is doing amazing things through you and in you. And he's just getting started, Amber. Just keep doing what you're doing and get ready to see God do amazing stuff. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it. And take care, Amber. We'll talk to you later. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless. Friends, what an amazing story. Wasn't that incredible? I'm just like so blown away right now by talking with her. I'm inspired, and I'm hopeful for, all of our kids, my friends. If we listen to what she said and stay bold and true to our faith and learn how to relate to these kids where they are, amazing things can happen. Don't ever give up on anybody, friends. Don't ever feel like my kid's too far gone. They'll never come back. You've heard it from an incredible young woman tonight, what God can do in their hearts. So friends, thank you so much for being here with me here on Catholic Feedback. It's been an amazing week, and I look forward to seeing you guys here next time. Take care, my friends, and good night. Thanks for listening to Catholic Feedback with Keith Nestor. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Stewardship, a mission of faith, and is also supported by our team at patreon.com/Keith Nestor. Please consider joining our support team. Catholic Feedback is a production of Down to Earth Ministries. For more information about Down to Earth or to bring me to your parish or event, visit down2earthministry.org. See you next time.